Hi everyone, it's Miss Costa here, and in this video we're going to go through some end of year revision focusing on expressions and equations. So you can see the table here that's got all the subtopics, and when you've completed them you can tick them off. You can also use the timestamps in the video to skip to the section that you need if you know that you need to focus on one more than the other. Okay, so first of all, we're going to focus on writing algebra in index form. Now, all index form means is writing something like the big number. This is called the base to the power of something. So 5 to the power of 3. This is writing it in index form, and this is the indice, or it's also known as the power. All that means is if I've got 5 times 5 times 5, I can simplify that by writing it as 5 to the power of 3, because 5 is being multiplied by itself 3 times. And that's all I do. And I'm going to apply the same logic for algebra. So over here, I've got A, and it's being multiplied by itself 3 times. So I'm going to write that as A to the power of 3. Here, I've got B, and it's multiplied by itself 4 times. So I'm going to write that as B to the power of 4. Next, I've got C, and it's being multiplied by itself 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So that's going to be C to the power of 6. So hopefully you're spotting the pattern. The little number here tells me how many times something is being multiplied by itself. And the way I say that is to the power of. So A to the power of 3, B to the power of 4, and C to the power of 6. Now over here, I've got 2 lots of things. So I've got D is being multiplied by itself 3 times, and then it's being multiplied by C, which is multiplied by itself twice. Now in algebra, I can write a number and a letter next to each other, or a letter and a letter next to each other, and it's implied that they're being multiplied. So the way this would simplify is D cubed C squared. You can write it alphabetically, but it doesn't really matter the order too much as long as you've simplified it. So similarly here, I've got E is being multiplied by itself twice, D is being multiplied by itself twice, so that would become E squared D squared. So now it gets a little bit trickier because I've got numbers involved, but I'm still going to use the same logic. So I look at all of the algebra. So A is being multiplied by itself twice. So that would become 2 times by A squared. And in algebra, when a number and a letter are next to each other, it automatically implies they're being multiplied. So I'd simplify that to 2A squared. You can imagine it as having invisible algebraic multiplication glue. So when the number and a letter are next to each other, it means they're being multiplied. Next, I've got this one, which is a little bit trickier. So I'm going to multiply the numbers first. 3 times 4 gives me 12. And then B is being multiplied by itself twice. So that's going to be 12 times by B squared. But I know that when a number and a letter are next to each other in algebra, that automatically means they're being multiplied. So it's simplified to 12B squared. Next is a little bit trickier. So I've got C times by 3 times by C times by 2 times C. Sometimes it's easier to write out what's happening with the algebra. And then I know that I can just look at the numbers. So I've got 3 times 2, which is 6, and C is being multiplied by itself 3 times. So that would become 6C to the power of 3. Then with this one, because we've been focusing on negatives, there's some negatives in here. So let's just have a look at what's happening. So I've got minus 2D times by D times by 3D. So let's look at the numbers first. I've got minus 2 times by 3. If I want, I could write it out like this. So let's write it out just to see what's going on. So minus 2D is actually minus 2 times D. 3D is 3 times D. So I've just split it apart so it's in its like base form. So now I look at the numbers. Minus 2 times by 3 is going to be minus 6. And then we've got 1, 2, 3 lots of D multiplied by one another. So that's going to be D cubed. And then C is multiplied by itself twice. So that'll become C squared. Then I've got an even trickier one. So again, everything is being multiplied in this calculation. So I'm going to look at the numbers first. So 5 times 2 times 3. 5 times 2 is 10. 10 times 3 is 30. So that's going to become 30. Now let's look at the letters. So we've got E cubed and E. So we could write this out actually. Let's just write it out so that we can see what's going on. So if you ever get stuck, just write it out and think, okay, what does this actually mean? So I multiplied the numbers to get 5 times 2 times 3, which is 30. Now let's look at how many times E is being multiplied by itself. So E times by E times by E times by E. E is being multiplied by itself 4 times, so it will become E to the power of 4. And then we've got D times by D, which is D squared. The final one is 2f cubed times 3f squared times by C, it should say times. Now the shortcut method, when we've got a lot going on, the rules for indices, so let's say we've got e to the power of 7 times by e to the power of 4, instead of writing them out multiple times, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, times by 1, 2, 3, 4, if you remember, repeated addition is the same as multiplication. So over here, I'm multiplying e 7 times and then 4 times. So in total, it's being multiplied 11 times. So that would become e to the power of the 11. And the shortcut is you add the powers. So when you're multiplying indices, the shortcut is you add the powers. So let's apply that logic to here. So I've got 2 times 3, which is 6, and then f cubed times by f squared. So that would become f to the power of 5, because 3 plus 2 is 5. And then it would just be C. Okay, so now I need to work out the value of each expression. An expression is just something that's got algebra and numbers in it, or just algebra, and they're telling me the value of the algebra. So work out the value of x squared when x equals 4. Well, what does x squared mean? It means x times by itself. And because x is 4, that means I'm going to need to do 4 times 4, which is 16. You could also have realised that you could just write 4 squared. So let's use that method for the next one. So y squared plus 1 when y is 5. So that means I'm going to do 5 squared plus 1, which is 25 plus 1, which gives me 26. So you substitute the value in and then you work out the calculation. Similarly, that's z is 5, so I'm going to do 5 squared minus 3. So that's 25 minus 3, which would give me 22. Next, I've got x cubed. Remember, a cube number is a number multiplied by itself 3 times. So this means x times x times x. And it's when x is 2. So I'm going to do 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. Then I've got y cubed plus 5. So 3 cubed, you could write it out the long way like I showed you for the first question, but once you get more comfortable, you can just write and substitute it as I'm doing now. So 3 cubed plus 5. Now what's 3 cubed? It's 27, and 27 plus 5 is going to give me 32. Then we've got z cubed minus 4 when z is 5. So 5 cubed minus 4. That is 125 minus 4. And remember, what happens when we've got 2 negatives next to each other? When you're subtracting a negative, imagine you've got that cold soup or whatever, and you're taking out ice cube, it's going to make it warmer. So that's going to become 125 plus 4, which is 129. Okay, so here I'm told that a rectangle has side length of 4x and x. And I need to write an expression for the perimeter of this rectangle. Now, what does perimeter mean again? It means the value of the outside of the shape. So it's where you add all of the sides together. So first, we're going to need to work out what the length of each side is. Now, I know that if this length is 4x, this length here is also going to be 4x, because in a rectangle, opposite sides are equal. So similarly, if this side here is x, this side here is going to be x. So I know that an expression for the perimeter is going to be x plus 4x plus x plus 4x, because that is all of the sides added up. I don't need to work out what it is. I need to write an expression. When I'm writing an expression, that means I don't need to actually work out the numerical value, but I do need to simplify it. So I've got x plus 4x plus x plus 4x. So you can, if you want to, whenever you've got an x, you can imagine there's an invisible 1, because it's one lot of x. So 1 plus 4 is 5, 1 plus 4 is 5. So that is going to be 10x. So an expression for the perimeter is 10x. Now I need to use my expression to find the perimeter of the rectangle when x is 7. So if the perimeter is equal to 10x and I'm told that x is 7, remember a number and a letter next to each other mean they're being multiplied. So I'm going to do 10 times 7. So that's going to be 70 centimetres. Okay, so what we tend to do in algebra is we don't write division as we do with numerical values. So we don't tend to say 5 divided by 2. We'd write it as a fraction instead, because this is the divisor. It means divide. So to write these divisions as fractions, all I'm going to do is write a over 7, because this means divide. So it's just a different way of writing it. So 2 divided by b is going to be 2 over b. And 2x divided by 3 is going to be 2x over 3. So you just want to get into the habit of writing divisions in algebra as a fraction. Now next we are going to write an expression. So I'm told that in a shop the normal price of a pair of shoes is £N. I don't know what it is. But in a sale the price of these shoes is reduced by £3. So I need to write an expression for the sale price. So the normal price of the shoes is N, and they are reduced by £3. So £3 is subtracted from their original price. So I'm just going to write N minus 3. I think about what's happening to the original, and that's what I add on. I'm then told that Phoebe bought 3 pairs of shoes in the sale. Write an expression for the total price of the shoes. So I know that 1 pair of shoes is N minus 3, and I want 3 lots of this. Now the way we show a multiplication in algebra, if there's more than one thing, is we put it in brackets. So this whole thing is being multiplied by 3, and the way I show that algebraically is by putting it in brackets and putting a 3 on the outside, because anything that's in brackets, it means it's being multiplied. So when you've got to do that, you put it in brackets. If the expression was, let's say n, like the original, then 3 lots of that would be 3n. But because it's n minus 3, I want 3 lots of this whole thing. So that's why I'm going to say 3 lots of n minus 3. Okay, so now we're going to write some expressions with area. So hopefully we remember the area of each shape. So to work out the area of a rectangle, what's the formula? The area of a rectangle is base times height, or you might know it as length times width. It doesn't matter, just basically the bottom side times by the height. Okay, so I just need to write an expression. I'm not solving anything, I'm just saying what do I need to do. I know I need to multiply the base, which is x plus 2, and I'm going to just put it in brackets, because when it's in brackets it shows that it's contained. So x plus 2 belongs to the same thing. We can't separate it, and I'm timesing that by 3. But remember, in algebra, when I show that something's being multiplied, I put it in brackets and I write the thing it's being multiplied by on the outside. So this would be my expression. Next shape is a parallelogram. So how do I work out the area of a parallelogram? I simply do base times height, and it's always the perpendicular height, so the straight up height where you can create a right angle with the base. So in this case it would be 5. So I'm just going to do the base, which is y plus 3, times by the height, which is 5. And because I'm going to have to write this in brackets, it's going to be 5 lots of y plus 3. Final one is a triangle. And how do I work out an area of a triangle? Well, this one's a little bit trickier, and I don't know why my pen went so wide. So an area of the triangle, I'm trying to make it so it's neater. So area of a triangle, what do? It's where I do base times by height, and then I divide by 2, or I times by a half, whichever one works better for you. So the base is x and the height is x plus 4. Remember, if there's anything that's more than one thing, we put it in a bracket. So what I'm going to do is just write it as x plus 4, because remember, in algebra, this division here this multiplication, sorry, is implied when something is next to itself. Okay, so that's how we'd write expressions. Remember, an expression doesn't mean find out what the value it is, just means write it in algebra. Okay, now that I've got used to brackets, I'm going to have to learn how to expand these brackets. So whenever you see the word expand, it means multiply out. So expand means multiply, and when you've got a bracket, you're going to multiply the number or the letter on the outside by each term on the inside. So I'm going to do 2 times by x, which is 2x, and then 2 times by 3, which is 6. And that's it. That's me having expanded the bracket. It means there's 2 lots of x plus 3. So if you think about, let's say, a length of something, and that's x, and that's 3 centimeters, and you want 2 lots of it, you're going to draw 2 lots of it out. So in total, what do you have? You've got 2 lots of x, and you've got 6. And that's how and why expanding brackets works. So now let's do the same. We're going to do minus 2 times by x, which is minus 2x, times, and then minus 2 times by 3. So minus 2 times 3 is minus 6. So we're going to write minus 6 there. Next, I've got minus 2 times by x, which is again going to be minus 2x, and then minus 2 times by minus 3. So remember, a negative times by a negative is always going to give you a positive answer. So I'm going to write plus 6. Then we've got 2 times by 2x, so that would give me 4x, and 2 times by minus 3 is minus 6. Minus 2 times 2x would be minus 4x, and then minus 2 times 3 is going to be minus 6. If you're struggling with your negatives, then go back to Unit 1, where we go into negatives in detail. Then we've got minus 2 times by 2x. Oh, it's the same question. I clearly forgot to change it, but that's fine. Minus 4x plus, nope, minus 4x minus 6. And then we've got minus 2 times by 2x, which is minus 4x, and then minus 2 times by minus 3. So remember, negative times by negative is positive, so that's going to be plus 6. And then minus 1 times by 2x, so that's going to be minus 2x. Minus 1 times by anything, it's just going to be its negative version. And then minus 1 times by minus 3, which is positive 3. So that's the single brackets, and now we're moving on to expand and simplify. So I'm still expanding the brackets, but there's another slight layer of complication. So when I've got things like this, what I do is I write everything out again, and I just expand the bracket. So I'm going to write 5 out because it's here on its own, and I'm going to expand the bracket. So that's going to be 2x, and 2 times 3 is positive 6. So now I've expanded the bracket, I can simplify my expression. I've got 5 plus 6, which is 11, and then I'm left with 2x. Okay, so expand and simplify doesn't mean solve. It's still going to be an algebra. You expand the brackets and you simplify what's left. So again, let's try this. We've got 8, and then we've got minus 2 times by x. So it's going to be minus 2x, and minus 2 times by 3, which is minus 6. Remember, the term, okay, the positive or the negative sign always belongs to the term after it. So that minus belongs to the 2. So it's a minus 2. So we've got 8 minus 6, which is 2. And then we've got minus 2x. Okay, next, another slightly tricky one. Oh, I don't know what's just happened. Go away. So we've got 5 minus, and then we've got minus 2x. So that would be minus 2x. And then we've got minus 2 times by minus 3. So that's going to be plus 6. Remember, a negative times by a negative is going to give you a positive answer. So let's see what's going to happen. So you've got 5 plus 6, which is 11. And then we've got minus 2x. So this is a little bit of a confusing one. But 11 minus 2x is going to become 11 plus 2x. Because when you've got two negatives next to each other, they become a positive. Taking away a negative is the same as adding. Okay, next we've got 12x. Take away, so expand the bracket, minus 2 times by 2x is going to be minus 4x. And then minus 2 times by 3 is going to be minus 6. So let's simplify it. We've got 12x minus 4x, which is 8x. And then we've got minus 6 left over, so that would be minus 6. And the next bit is the tricky, well, it might, for some of you, it might be a bit easier. We expand the brackets first, and then we simplify it. So we've got 7 times x, which is 7x, 7 times 2, which is 14, positive 3 times by 2x, so that will be plus 6x, and then 3 times by 3, so that's going to be positive 9. So we collect the like terms, collect the algebra together. 7 plus 6 is going to be 13x, and then 14 plus 9 is going to give you 23. Okay, so here we've got some more expanding, but this is where I'm going to do powers of x. So remember, when something is multiplied by itself, we can write it as that thing squared. So x times x becomes x squared. So that's the key thing that you want to remember for this. And that will help you massively. So if you've got, let's say, y times y, that's also going to become y squared. Anything times by itself is that thing squared. So x times x is going to become x squared. And then x times by 4 is going to become 4x. And that's all. Expand just means multiply out. Then we've got x times x again, so that's x squared. And then x times by minus 8, which is minus 8x. Then we've got x times by 2x, which would become 2x squared, and x times by 3, which is 3x. So each time, all I'm doing, I'm multiplying the thing on the outside by each term on the outside. Y times by 8y would be 8y squared, and y times by 3 is 3y. So the reason I'm drawing these little arrows above is so that you remember that each time you draw an arrow, you are multiplying the terms. So we've got minus x times by x, so that's going to become minus x squared, and minus x times by 4 is going to become minus 4x. Minus x times by 7 would be minus 7x, and minus x times minus 8x, a negative times by a negative, is always going to give you a positive answer, so that's going to become positive 8x squared. Then we've got 3x times by 2x, so 3 times 2 is 6, x times x is x squared. And then we've got 3x times by 3, which is 9x. For the final one, we've got 5y times by minus 8y, so that would be minus 40y squared, and 5y times by minus 3, so 5 times minus 3 is minus 15, so it'd be minus 15y. Okay, next we're moving on to factorising, which is like the opposite of expanding. So if expanding is multiplying out the bracket, factorising is where we put in the bracket. So we think to ourselves, okay, what's the highest common factor between the two terms in my expression? So we've got 5x and 5, and I know that 5 multiplies into both of them. So I'm going to put 5 outside the bracket. And then, what would I multiply 5 by to get to 5x? Well, 5 times by x would give me 5x, and 5 times by 1 would give me 5. So you're kind of doing the reverse. You can always double check if you've done it right by expanding it back out. So 5 times x is 5x, 5 times 1 is 5. So you know you've done it right. So factorise means put it into brackets by finding the highest common factor. So the highest common factor of 8 and 16. So that would be 8. So I put 8 outside the brackets. And then 8 times by what gives me 8x? That's x. And 8 times by what gives me 16? Well, 8 times 2 makes 16. Let's try again. So the highest common factor of 8y and minus 4 would be 4. And 4 times what gives me 8y? That would be 2y. And then 4 times by minus 1 gives me minus 4. So they're getting a little bit trickier, and if you're not feeling comfortable with factors, then let me know and I can make a quick video about factors and how to find the highest common factor. But for 12y and 15, the highest number that multiplies into both of them is 3. So I'm going to put 3 on the outside, and then 3 times by what gets me 12? 3 times 4 gets me 12, so that would be 4y. and 3 times by minus 5 is going to give me minus 15. Remember, you can always double check by seeing if they expand back out to the original. Okay, so over here I'm looking at 10x plus 5. So I'm looking for the highest common factor, the largest number that fits into 10x and 5. So that would be 5. I put that outside the brackets, and then I think to myself, 5 times by what makes 10x? 5 times 2 makes 10, so that would be 2x. And 5 times 1 makes 5. Then with 14 and 21, what's the highest common factor that goes into that? So this one's a little bit trickier because I need to think what number that is not 14 or 21, what number multiplies into both. And 14 and 21 are both in the 7 times tables. So I'm going to put 7 outside the brackets. And 7 times what makes 14? That would be 2. And then 7 times minus 3 makes minus 21. So it would be minus 3x. With 18 and 27, again, let's think what number goes into that. Well, 9. So I'm going to put 9 on the outside. And then 9 times by 2x would give me 18. And 9 times by minus 3 gives me minus 27. And with the final one, I've got 30x and 52. And this is going to be slightly trickier. So I want to think of all of the factors of 30. So 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, and then 5 times by 6. And then the factors of 52 is 1 times 52, 2 times by 26. Does 3 go into it? So does 3 go into 52? 3's into 5 go once, remainder 2, 3's into 22, go 7, and then it's a decimal, so that 3 doesn't go into it. 4, does 4 go into 52? 4's into 5, go once, remainder 1, 4's into 12, go 3 times, so I know that 4 times 13 goes into it. 5 doesn't go into 52 because it doesn't end in a 0 or a 5. 6 into 52, well, I know that 6 times by 9 is 54, so 6 wouldn't go into it. 7 wouldn't go into it. 8 doesn't go into it. And then neither does 9, 10 or 11. So the highest common factor of this would be 2. 2 is the highest factor that is a factor of 30 and 52. So I'd put 2 on the outside. 2 times 15x makes 30. And 2 times by 26 gives me 52. Okay, now it gets a little bit trickier when I've got x, but remember that x times by x gives me x squared. So over here, if I know that the highest common factor of x and x squared is going to be x, I put that outside the brackets, and x times x gives me x squared, and x times 1 gives me x. So that's how I'd do that. The factor, if I've got an x squared, I know that's the same as saying x times x, so x is a factor. Similarly here with d squared, d is common to both of them, and d times d gives me d squared, and d times 1 gives me 1 lot of d. Same over here, I've got b as the common factor, b times 1 gives me b, and b times by b gives me b squared. I've got 3x squared plus x, so x is the common thing, it's the algebra this time that's common. And x times 3x gives me 3x squared, and x times by 1 gives me x. So over here I'm going to look for the highest common factor of the numbers and the algebra part. So the highest common factor of 20 and 15 is 5, and then the highest common factor of y squared and y is y. So 5y goes outside the brackets, and then 5y times by 4y gives me 20y squared, and 5y times by minus 3 gives me minus 15y. Same thing here, the highest common factor of 4 and 6 is 2, so I'm going to put 2y on the outside, and 2y times by 2y gives you 4y squared, and 2y times by minus 3 is going to give me minus 6y. Again, the highest common factor of 20y squared, this is the same as that question, so let's ignore that. And then for the last one, the highest common factor of 16 and 24, the highest common factor would be 4, and then the highest common factor of x squared and x would be x, so I put that outside the brackets, and then 4x times by 4x gives me 16x squared, and 4x times by minus 6 gives me minus 24x. Now for the next part, we are solving one-step equations. Now there's loads of ways that we can do this, but I want you to start using the balancing method. So let's think about, what does the balancing method actually mean? So it's when you have something like, let's say, x plus 2, so that's 1 kilogram, 2 kilograms, and let's imagine this is on a scale. Okay, so this scale, the thing with scales is that if they're balanced, they're gonna be like remaining on the same level. If they become unbalanced, it's going to tip downwards or upwards. So at this moment, x plus 2 is equal to 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now what happens with scales, if you take the same amount or add the same amount onto them, then they still remain balanced. So if I took away 2 here, so I'm taking away 2 on this side, and I take away 2 from this side, it's going to remain balanced, okay? And if I take away 2, that leaves me with just x on this side, so I can figure out how much just x is going to weigh. So that would leave me with x equals 9 minus 2 is 7. And once I've got it in the form x equals, that is when I've solved the equation. So to solve an equation means to work out the value of x, or whatever the algebra is. So let's use the balancing method. Imagine the scales, and all you do is, as long as you do the same thing to both sides, they're going to remain balanced. Now to get rid of this minus, I want to use the inverse operation. So the inverse, or the opposite of subtraction, is adding. So I'm going to add 7, because if I add 7 to this side, that cancels out to make 0. But because I've done it to this side, I'm going to want to do it to this side as well, so that the equations remain balanced. So that would leave me with x equals 5 plus 7, which is 12. Now it gets a little bit trickier when we've got a multiplication. So this means 3 times by x. So 3 times by something gives me 12. What's the inverse of multiplying by 3? It's dividing by 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. So it's going to cancel out that 3 on this side. But what I'm going to have to do is the exact same thing to the other side. So I divide both sides by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, so it just leaves me with x, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. Now over here we've got a division. Remember, this line here means divide. So something divided by 3 is 5. The inverse of dividing is multiplying. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. So I'm going to be left with x equals 15. Now most of these you would have been able to figure out in your head perhaps, but what's really good is if you start practicing the balancing method and showing you're working out with the easy one-step equations, so that when it comes to the harder ones, you know the method and you know what next step to take. So here we've got minus 2 plus x is minus 6. I want to get rid of that minus 2, so I'm just left with x on its own. So I'm going to have to do the inverse, which is add 2. So I'm going to have to add 2 to both sides, and I'd just be left with x, because minus 2 plus 2 cancels. Then I have to do minus 6 plus 2, and remember with negatives, imagine the number line, it's minus 6 degrees, and you're adding. When you're adding, you go up the number line, it gets warmer, so it's going to be minus 4. Then I've got 3 plus x equals minus 9. At the moment, this is a positive 3, because there's nothing, if there's nothing in front of it, if there's no minus in front of it, it's a positive. So I'm going to have to subtract 3 from both sides. So x is going to be minus 9 minus 3, which is minus 12. Now it doesn't matter which side the x is on. So here we've got 3x. 3 is being multiplied by x. So what am I going to have to do? I'm going to have to divide by 3. So divide both sides by 3. Minus 15 divided by 3 is minus 5. So minus 5 equals x. And an equation, it doesn't matter which way round you write it. If minus 5 is x, then x is also minus 5. So with the last part, what's happening here? Remember, this is a division. So I'm going to have to times both sides by 3. Minus 7 times 3 is minus 21. So x is minus 21. Okay, so just like I did with when I was writing and forming expressions, I'm going to do the same, except I'm going to do this with equations. Now, the difference between an expression and an equation is that an equation has an equal sign in it. So that's what I'm looking for. So Ingrid has B books on her bookcase. She gives 8 of her books to charity, and she now has 26 books left on her bookcase. So I need to write an equation involving B. Well, she started out with B books and she gave 8 away to charity. So she subtracted 8 from them. And what is she left with? The result is 26. So my equation is just going to be B minus 8 equals 26, because however many books were on, that's B. I took away 8 and the end result is 26. I now need to solve my equation to find out how many books Ingrid originally had. So I've got B minus 8 is 26. To solve, it means get the letter on its own. So what I'm going to do is remove anything apart from the B. So to move anything from one side of the equation to the other, you do the inverse operation. The inverse of subtracting is adding, because minus 8 plus 8 is 0. So that would cancel out on that side and leave me with B. But whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I'm going to have to do 26 plus 8, which is 34. So therefore, B is 34. So Ingrid originally had 34 books on her bookcase. I'm going to do exactly the same kind of thinking with forming and solving equations. It's just this time it's with perimeter. So I'm told that the perimeter of this shape is 20 centimeters. Now, what's perimeter again? It's the distance around the outside of the shape. So first I need to figure out the lengths of each side as an expression. So remember, with a rectangle, opposite sides are equal. So that's going to be 4x and that's going to be x. So the perimeter is going to be 4x plus 4x plus x plus x. 4 plus 4 is 8 plus 2 is 10. So I know that the perimeter is 10x, and they've told me that the perimeter is 20 centimeters. So therefore, 10x is 20 centimeters. If I know that 10x is 20 centimeters, I know that when a number and a letter are next to each other, that means they're being multiplied. So 10 is being multiplied by x. So to get rid of that, I'm going to have to divide by 10. So 10 divided by 10 is 1. That's why it cancels out. And 20 divided by 10 is 2. So x is 2. Now over here, I've got the area. So remember, how do I work out area? Area is base times by height. The perpendicular height is what I'm always going to use. So the one that's at right angles to. They're sometimes going to give you the slant height to try and trick you, but you're not going to use the diagonal height. You're always going to use the perpendicular height. So the area is going to be x times by 8, which is just 8x. And they've told me that the area is 24 centimeters squared. So I know that 24 centimeters squared is equal to 8x. And I need to figure out what 8x is. So 8 is being multiplied by 8. So to get rid of it, I'm going to divide by 8, because that would cancel 8 out. So x is going to be 24 divided by 8, which is 3. And remember, it doesn't matter whether you write it like this or like that, it's the same thing. So now we've still got some more shapes. So this is relying on your knowledge of other things, and we're combining it with algebra. So we need to find out what the value of y is. Now this is a straight line. I know the angles on a straight line sum to 180 degrees. So I know that this angle plus this angle plus this angle, so 3y plus 5y is going to need to equal 180 degrees. So 3y plus, remember, if it's not got a number in front of it, there's an invisible one because it's one lot of y. So 3 plus 1 is 4 plus 5 is 9. So 9y is equal to 180. And to figure out what 1y is, remember there's an invisible multiplication sign, so I'm going to divide by 9 on both sides, and 180 divided by 9 is 20. So y is 20 degrees. Now volume, if you remember from the last unit, the volume is the area of the cross section times by the depth. So this line here is going to be y, because all in 3D shapes, the same lengths in different parts are going to be the same. So that length is y, the height of the shape is y. So the volume is going to be 5 times by y, which is the area of the cross section, and then I times that by the depth, which is 2. So that's going to give me 10y, and they've told me that the volume is 30. So I know that 30 is equal to 10y, and to figure out what one lot of y is, I'm going to need to divide by 10. So 30 divided by 10 is 3, so y is 3. Okay, so here I've got two-step equations, so this is why the balancing method was so important for the first step. So I've got two parts here, 2x plus 5 equals 9. Now remember, solve means get it in the form x equals, so you want to eliminate everything on one side. So what's good is if you first just cover x, just cover it with your finger, and what else is left? Well, there's a plus 5. So I'm going to want to subtract 5 on both sides, okay? So I covered up x with my finger, so I'm left with 2x is 4. And actually, let's try and visualize this just so that you can see what's happening. So I've got 2x plus 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's on one side of the scale. And then here I've got 9, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. So what's happening is the first thing I've done is I've taken away 5, okay? I took away 5 from here, so I'm going to do the same to the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what am I left with? I'm then left with 2x equals 4. And then what do I do? To get one lot of x, there's 2 x's, so I'm going to half it. I'm going to divide by 2. So x must be 2. And that makes sense because if x here, if I'm just left with x is 4, then half of that must be one lot of x. So that's why the balancing method works, as long as you do the inverse to each thing. So over here, I cover up the x. That's the first thing that I'm going to do. Cover this up. What's left? A plus 4. I do the inverse of it so that it can cancel out, because 4 minus 4 is 0. And I'm left with 3x equals 9. I then know that 3 times something equals 9. So I'm going to do the inverse, which is dividing by 3. So x is going to equal 3. Let's do the same thing again. 4x, cover it up, cover the x and its coefficient up. I'm going to do the inverse of plus 3, which is minus 3. So I'm going to be left with 4x equals 11 take away 3 is 8. And then I'm going to divide by 4. So the final step would be 8 divided by 4, which is 2. So now what I'm going to do is solve each of these equations, and these have brackets in them, so these are slightly trickier. But remember, all brackets means is expanding, which means multiplying it out. So let's have a go. I have this bracket and I'm going to multiply it out. So I've got 2x plus 6 equals 9. And then I'm going to solve it just like I did the ones before. I cover up the x and I'm like, okay, there's a plus 6. So I'm going to want to eliminate that first. So I'm going to be left with 2x equals 3. And then what does 2x mean? It means 2 times by x. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So x is going to be 3 over 2, which is 1.5. The next one is a little bit trickier, but let's still do what we know that we can. So we know that we can expand the bracket out. So that would be 3x plus 12 minus 2 equals 13. Now we could simplify this. We could bring these two together. So that's going to become 3x plus 10 equals 13. Then what could I do? Well, I cover up the x and I'm going to do the inverse to anything else on that side. So I'm going to subtract 10 because it's going to cancel out. So I'll be left with 3x equals 13 minus 10 is 3. And the last step, I'm going to divide both sides by 3 because 3x means 3 times x, and the inverse of multiplication is division. So I'll be left with x equals 1. The last step is 2 times 2x is 4x, 2 times by 3 is 6, and then I've got a plus 3x equals 11. So let's bring all the like terms together. We've got 4x plus 3x is going to become 7x. So I'll be left with 7x plus 6 equals 11. I'm going to subtract 6 because I want to get rid of it, eliminate it, move it to the other side. So I'm going to be left with 7x equals 11 take away 6 is 5. And then 7x means 7 times x. So to get rid of this, I'm going to divide by 7 because 7 divided by 7 is going to be 1. And I'll be left with x is 5 over 7. And if it's not an easy number to divide, it's absolutely fine to leave your answer as a fraction. And for the last part of this unit, we're going to use a formula. So when we're using a formula, we're just given some algebraic stuff, so m equals dv, and we're going to be given values that we have to substitute in. So here I'm told that the formula used to work out the mass of an object is m equals dv, where d is the density of the object and v is the volume. So m represents the mass, d is the density, and v is the volume. Now work out the value of m when d is 4 and v is 3. So I know that m equals d times v, because when a number and a letter are next to each other, there's an invisible multiplication sign. And they've told me that d has a value of 4 and v has the value of 3. So to work out m, I'm just going to substitute those in. 4 times 3 is 12. So the mass is just 12. Now for the next part, it's a little bit trickier because it says work out v when m is 30 and d is 5. So let's write out the formula and what it means. M is d times v, and let's substitute in the values they've told me. So m is 30 and they've told me that d is 5. So I know that 30 equals 5v. So how could I work out what v is? Well, 5v means 5 times v, so I could divide both sides by 5. 30 divided by 6, 5 is 6, and 6 is v, so therefore v must equal 6.